In this video, we're going to be looking at the angles of isosceles triangles. Recall that an isosceles triangle is a triangle with two congruent sides. Two equal sides on an isosceles triangle. I'm looking at this triangle here. Even though there are no numbers, I can see that these markings are the same, indicating that these two sides are the same. Different marking down here, meaning it's a different measurement. Isosceles triangles also have two congruent angles, which are known as the base angles. The base angles are located opposite of the two congruent sides. So if you go across from one of the congruent sides, you're going to find a base angle. This angle right here is one of your base angles. All right, that's a base angle there. Across from the other congruent side, you come to this angle, and this is your other base angle. The third, which is the unequal angle, is called the vertex angle. This angle up here, which is across from the unequal side, this one here is the vertex angle. All right, so based off of the given angles, you should be able to calculate either a vertex angle or one of the two base angles. And that's what we're going to practice doing down here. I have three triangles, and in each triangle, I can see that they are isosceles based off of the markings on the sides. And I gave you one of the three interior angles. We're going to calculate the other two based on the given angle. This first angle here, 70 degrees, is across from the unequal side, meaning that this is the vertex angle. That means that the other two angles are equal to each other. And since I don't know their value, I'm just going to call them x. To get the measure or the value of x, I'm going to create my equation. The three interior angles added together will equal 180 degrees. So x plus 70 is 180. X plus x is 2x. And then to isolate 2x, we'll subtract 70 on each side. 2x then is equal to 110. And if you divide each side by 2, that means that x is 55. So each one of these base angles is going to be 55 degrees. In my next picture, I've given this angle right here, 50 degrees. It's across from one of the two congruent sides, meaning that this is one of the base angles. If you go across from the other congruent side, you come to this angle over here, which is the other base angle, and base angles are congruent. So that one is also 50 degrees. That means we need to get the measure of this angle up here, the vertex angle, which is across from the unequal side. Let's call it x. X plus 50 is 180 when you add the three interior angles together. 50 and 50 is 100, so x plus 100 equals 180. And then to get x, just subtract 100 from each side, so x is going to be 80 degrees. This is an 80-degree vertex angle. In this third picture, all right, this is the vertex angle because it's across from the unequal side. If you go across from the two equal sides, you get the unknown angles, which are the congruent base angles, so we'll just call them x. X plus 65 adds up to 180, which becomes 2x plus 65 for 180. Subtract 65 on each side. 2x is 115. And then if you divide each side by 2, x is going to be 57.5. So each of our base angles on this triangle are 57.5 degrees. In this picture, I'm going to calculate the measure of each angle. Notice that every angle has been labeled with an algebraic expression, x, and 2x plus 4 is that angle up there. I know this is an isosceles triangle because it has two congruent angles. It has two congruent angles and it has two congruent sides. Across from the congruent angles are the congruent sides. So these are the two congruent sides. To figure out the value of x, I'm going to set up my equation where I add the three interior angles together and set it equal to 180. 2x plus 4 plus x is 180. 2x plus x becomes 4x. Plus 4 is 180. And then if we subtract 4 from each side, 4x is going to be 176. All right, so if I divide each side by 4, that's going to give me x equals 44. as my value for the variable. So I know this is a 44-degree angle, and I know this is a 44-degree angle. And now I just have to calculate this angle here by substituting in 44 for x. So this becomes 2 times 44 plus 4. 2 times 44 is 88, and add 4 to that for 92 degrees. So this is a 92-degree angle, and then we have our two 44-degree angles. And if you add 44 with 44, that's 88, and 88 plus 92, 180 degrees. In our next set of problems, we're going to calculate the value of the variable in each picture. Okay, and in this example, our variable is found in this angle right here, which they've labeled as 4x minus 2. We need to figure out what the value of x is. All right, notice that this side is 8 and this side is also 8. So these are the two congruent sides. And so if you go across from those two congruent sides, you will find the two congruent base angles, which are the two labeled angles. This angle is 62 degrees, and this angle is labeled as 4x minus 2, and they're equal to each other because the base angles are congruent. So we can make an equation that says 4x minus 2 equals 62 to help us figure out what x is. Let's add 2 to each side. That means that 4x equals 64. And if you divide each side by 4, then we know that x is going to equal 16. In our second picture, all right, we know that this angle right here, they've labeled as 3x plus 6. And again, I have to try to figure out what the value of x is. All right, this angle is across from one of the congruent sides, meaning it's one of the congruent base angles. And if you go across from the other congruent side, this is your other congruent base angle. So this angle is also 3x plus 6. All right. Now, we also had a clue right here that this angle was a right angle. So this was a 90-degree angle. And so if I wanted to figure out what the value of x is, I could do it two different ways. I can either add this angle, and the 90-degree angle and set it equal to 180. Or since this is 90, I can take that away, meaning the other two angles together have to add up to 90 degrees. So let's go ahead and do that. 3x plus 6 plus 3x plus 6 equals 90. 3x and 3x is 6x, 6 and 6 is 12. So 6x plus 12 is 90. Subtract 12 from each side, meaning that 6x is going to be equal to 78. And then if you divide each side by 6, then x is going to have a value of 13. In this example, here's our variable, 2x. I need to figure out the value of x. And again, this is across from one of the congruent sides, so it's one of the congruent base angles. And if I go across from this congruent side, I get my other congruent base angle right here. So this angle is also 2x. And now I've got the three interior angles. If I add them together, I should get 180. 2x plus 2x plus 40 is 180. 2x and 2x is 4x plus 40 is 180. Subtract 40 from each side, meaning that 4x is going to be 140. And then if you were to divide each side by 4, that means that x is going to equal 35. Going underneath. 3 more pictures, same idea, find the value of each variable. This is labeled as 3x, this is labeled as x. What is the value of x? Well, this x is across from one of the congruent sides, making it a base angle. And across from this congruent side is this unlabeled angle, but it's equal to the other base angle, so this is x as well. So these are the three interior angles of your triangle, so let's add them together. X plus 3x has to be equal to 180. Xx and 3x is 5x, so 5x equals 180. Now we'll go ahead, divide each side by 5, and when we do that, we're going to get a value of 36 for x. In our next picture, all right, we have 2x up here. This angle is 6x plus 6. It's one of the base angles, and going across from this side is our other base angle. So this right here, this unlabeled angle is also 6x plus 6. So these are the three interior angle measures. Let's add them together. 2x plus 6x plus 6 plus 6x plus 6 adds up to 180. 2x, 6x, and 6x makes 14x, and 6 plus 6 is 12, equals 180. We'll subtract 12 from each side. 14x is equal to 168. And when we go ahead and divide each side by 14, x is going to be equal to 12. And then we have one more picture to look at. In this picture, there's actually two different variables. Okay, this angle right here has been labeled as 6y minus 2, while this angle right here has been labeled as 4x plus 20. We have to figure out what each of their measures is. Now, I can't set these equal to each other even though they are equal because the variables are different. But the key to solving this is that vertex angle up there of 52 degrees. I know that all three angles add up to 180, so let's start by subtracting the vertex angle of 52 and seeing what's left over. All right, well, 180 minus 52 is 128. So these two angles added together have to add up to 128. And since they're equal, I'm just going to divide 128 by 2 to figure out what they're each equal to. Well, half of 128 is 64. So I know that each of these angles is actually 64 degrees. So now I can simply say that 4x plus 20 equals 64. And I can also say that 6y minus 2 is 64. Both of these angles are 64-degree angles, so making these equations will help us figure out the value of the variable. For x, we'll start by subtracting 20 on each side, meaning that 4x is 44. And then if you divide each side by 4, x equals 11. For y, 6y minus 2 is 64. Add 2 to each side. 6y equals 66. And then if you divide each side by 6, y is also equal to 11.